Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I'm your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend Mike.
Hey.
So today, we're talking about House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 6, which is titled...
Smallfolk.
Smallfolk.
And we're not talking about hobbits.
No, not halflings, but the Smallfolk, the commoners, the people of King's Landing and other areas of the Song of Ice and Fire universe. So before we get into this any farther, we'll give out the typical reminders. If you want to get in contact with the show, you can send us an email, which is fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram, which is at fantasyrewindpod, or Twitter, or X, which is titled at fantasyrewind. All right, Mike, without any further delay, let's dive into the rewind.
Fantasy Rewind. All right, Dylan. So, Season 2, Episode 6 here, Smallfolk. Not like, obviously big action or anything like that. We're still kind of doing a slow build here, predictably, to the season finale, but there's still a lot here to digest. We have the beginning of this episode. Lots of stuff's kind of going down, but we have some fallout in King's Landing from Aemon. Making choices, ignoring the Queen Mother, or whatever they call her. You have Rhaenyra, like, what are we going to do? Let's have this noble man who's also the knight. I forget his name, but his dad was the one over at Rook's Rest, I think, or his dad was the one that got killed by Sir Criston Cole. And let's have him see if Sea Smoke will take him on as a rider.
Mm-hmm.
And and we get a resolution as to who Sea Smoke's rider is in this episode as well. And of course, we can't forget in the King's Landing we get the Smallfolk, which is the name of the episode. So there's a lot going on here, and the Smallfolk name also represents more than just what's happening in King Landing, but also with Sea Smoke.
Right.
I want to kind of hit some of the small pieces that we saw in this episode first to kind of get them out of the way while they're fresh in my mind before we dig into some of those bigger stories. You good with that?
Let's do it.
All right. This part, I was like, ooh, what's going to happen? We sort of get a slow segment here with Rhaenyra's kids over in the Vale, and they see this huge spot of like fire burned area, and we're kind of like, well, that's the sheep stealer, right? That's that big dragon that's sort of wild, if you will, that they're not counting. And we have, and I don't remember her name.
It's Rhaena.
We have Rhaena sort of sitting there playing with this dragon toy, and the Queen of the Vale comes in and is like talking to her, and you'll have passage over to the Free Cities, and you can go and do that. And you're sort of left like, because she asks about this dragon, right? And it's wild, whatever. My mind immediately went to the fact that, she doesn't have a dragon. She wants one. The ones at Dragonstone didn't take her.
The Dragonstone rejected her.
Well, she might try to get this one, just like Aemon got her mom's. So that's sort of like my prediction, just based off of her playing with the toy and asking about it and everything else. Like,
The other thing I would take away from this scene here is just like the attitude of the queen, or the attitude of the ruler there at in the Vale towards Rhaenyra's children and Rhaena herself, basically being like a little dismissive of them, a little bit cagey in what information she's willing to leak out. Like the fact that she wanted a dragon from Rhaenyra to basically protect her land from this wild dragon. But she didn't really say it like forthright.
Yeah, that's true too. That's a good point.
So like it just kind of reminds me of how like in Game of Thrones universe, in the Song of Ice and Fire universe here, the Vale is kind of viewed as like this impregnable mountainy area that kind of keeps it to itself, keeps its borders closed, and is cagey. And this woman here is personifying that to a T in this episode here.
Yeah, she really is. But it makes me excited to kind of see, because that's the only clip we get with them. Excited for me to see what happens next later on. All right, so we also have this scene with Corlys Valerian kind of talking with his children, not his children, his bastards. Well, one specifically, the one that saved his life previously, and I want you on my boat as my first mate. He's kind of, I feel like he's beating around the bush here and basically being like, I would like to legitimize you and have you be the heir to my house.
Right, he's kind of like slowly leading him into his inner circle and like not really taking that full step of acknowledging that he's his father, let alone legitimizing him.
Correct.
But still like taking like the roundabout way of saying, hey, I like you. You're good at what you do.
Yeah. And we're kind of, we'll see this again next episode too, at the beginning, because I've watched that far. I watched past that, but we see that with the other brother too. And the other brother is kind of like, why are you doing this?
Right.
And I think that's interesting because that's planting seeds for maybe something farther down the line with how his brother views, the Valerian house and like not being legitimized and all of that. And if we know anything about Game of Thrones and the Game of Thrones universe, if people are unhappy, that resentment tends to build. Doesn't just go
that's
away.
Real life too.
Yeah, that is real life too. So I'm sure that's not the last we're going to kind of get hints at that. Yeah. So let's go over to Dragonstone and kind of run through Rhaenyra's line here because I think it's very interesting in this episode. We have her, basically sharing the decision her and her son made that she's going to ask, well, at least the noble-born, to try to be accepted by the dragons, right? To become new dragon riders, even though this has never been done before. Her council immediately is like, what? Why are we doing this? Like, come on now. Mm-hmm. This is a great risk. Let's just get arms and soldiers. And she's like, you guys don't understand. Right now we have 2 dragons here, mine and my son's, and who have riders. Well, and she technically has 3, but like she's thinking against the Greens. Like they don't have enough firepower without Daemon. And she kind of has to think about the fact that they don't have Daemon, right?
Right. She says that several times throughout this episode. Like, Daemon, Daemon, Daemon. All I hear about is I need to get Daemon here. I'm the queen. I'm the ruler here. I ain't need no man to help me. Yeah. But she is resistant to seeking help from Daemon. And we'll touch on his arc in a bit here. But let's stick with Rhaenyra for now.
Yeah. And so we have throughout this episode she, brings up the Kingsguard dude who, for a minute you're like, oh, wow, Seasmoke's going to accept him. And then Seasmoke's just like, yeah, you know what? On second thought, marshmallow. Wow. Die.
And see, I think a lot of that has to do with that guy's attitude. Like, he came in there, like, very timid, very afraid of everything that was happening. And then he started to kind of get like overwhelmed with almost dragon fever towards the end there.
Yeah.
And was almost too eager to take on a dragon. And I think the dragon, Seasmoke kind of acknowledged, this isn't right. This person shouldn't be riding me, and barbecued him.
Yeah. And then Seasmoke flies off and, goes and finds at the end of the episode, goes and finds one of Valerian's bastards and chooses him.
Right, like kind of chases him down and like forces him into the woods and like corners him and then basically surrenders to him saying, hey, you, ride me. Yeah. You don't have a choice in the matter.
Which kind of, in a way could kind of you could really talk yourself into because his last rider was Valerian's son, right? Right. So maybe there is some identifying, like, Valyrian is okay too.
Yeah, like calls to like.
Yeah, not just Targaryen, because I don't know if he would have any Targaryen blood in him technically, but he would have Valyrian blood.
Would have Valyrian, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty cool. I thought that was neat. And at the end of the episode, we have Rhaenyra flying out to confront the rider, who she doesn't know yet.
So one quick thing that I thought was interesting is when the Kingsguard guy got barbecued, the dragon tamer that was with him slit their own throat, basically, with the knife that they had, so that they didn't burn to death. They, bled out and died quickly. Whereas the Kingsguard guy just kind of got melted and barbecued to a crispy kebab, while Rhaenyra and the rest of the team watched on in horror, not being able to help at all.
I didn't even notice that. That was a good eye. I guess that would be better.
Yeah, right. Just end it quickly.
Though you do think Dragonfire would almost be instantaneous, It'd be so hot.
I don't know
it
how
would
it
just
works.
I don't know. I feel like it would almost overextend your nervous system to a point where you wouldn't even feel pain anymore, but who knows?
Who knows?
We don't have dragons.
Yeah, I don't have a dragon. I don't want to be burned by a dragon.
That is true. Let's talk to a little bit. In this episode, we have Rhaenyra, like you said, dealing with the loss of Daemon, and it's kind of coming back up, and she, at one point, one of her small council members is confronting her, we need to do this, and she smacks him, and she's like, it's my fault. Somewhere along the line, I stopped making you fear me. And I was like,
right, that's a good line.
That was a great line. And I was like, yes, because what that was almost direct opposite of what's been happening in the Greenville for the Queen. And we'll get there in just a moment, but we also in this episode have the White Worm and Rhaenyra getting a little close, feeling each other's vibes, and making out a little bit. And she's definitely gotten really close, and she's bringing up some good points, right? She brought up that we need to get the Smallfolk involved. I think had the idea for the shipments of food that they sent, which incited trouble
for the Greens.
Yes. And she brings up to why Rhaenyra should still be queen and why she should still be working for this, and she really reaffirms Rhaenyra's belief in herself. And then they made out because it was obviously a very emotional scene. And that was also before the dragon sea smoke at the end of the episode. But what did you think about the White Worm and all of that? I'm not sure if any of that was included in the books or not, but obviously it's a history, so it might be missing a lot of that stuff anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely made up as far as I know of. It is what it is. I don't really remember too much about the White Worm. In general, she was a minor character in the histories.
Well, she's definitely been played up a lot here, and she's had a really rough life. We get that in her story of herself too. But let's flip over to the Smallfolk. King's Landing, man. Ripe. And I'm not just talking about the smells of flea bottom. There's no food. There is no food. And they see as these sheep are carted in for dragons or for feasts. We don't know. But outside of that, there's no food for anyone else. So what the heck, right? And then you have, I would say, these...
Rhaenyra's agent is out there spreading the word as well.
Oh, yes. We have agents spreading the word. And then these boats with food show up with Rhaenyra's flags. She hasn't forgotten us. And it incites a whole bunch of rebellion.
Alicent gets named the Queen of Fishes and gets a fish smacked right on her face, which was interesting.
Yeah, and attacked, actually.
Yeah, yes.
And so a lot, it's not going well there. We have some revolts and such, and Aemon's, he's what would happen if Daemon was king, right?
Pretty much, and I think that's a very apt comparison, which we can talk about a little bit more when we discuss next episode. But something else that did happen in this episode with the Greens, and Alicent in particular with Aemon, was her dismissal from the Small Council.
Yes, Aemon did dismiss her after the meeting, and even during the meeting, he ignored what she had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And she was bringing up good points. I mean, basically, we have at the beginning of this episode, too, and I forgot to mention this, you have the Lannisters stopping in the Riverlands, or somewhere, I'm not quite sure where, but staying at this, the Iron Tooth or something, the Golden Claw, whatever the name of that keep is that they were at. And he's like, yeah, we're going to stay here until we have Prince Aemon fly down with us. Which makes sense, because, like, what's the point of us marching on something, on, like, Daemon, when he can just burn us all to the ground?
Right, to get roasted and have all their troops destroyed by a dragon and one man.
Correct, and Aemon obviously is not very happy about being summoned.
Right. It's where the bristles of youth start coming in, too, where he's almost, like, affronted by this summons of the Prince Regent. And he's like, you want to summon me? I'll come, but if I come, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah. And at the same time, though, like, they're like, well, heck, like, it's almost like, yeah, duh, they're going to need a dragon with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Because they're going to be closer, well, I guess it's still not technically that far, but as we learned last time, I can't really speak to the time and distance it takes to fly places because I have no clue.
Yeah, it's very murky. It is the Riverlands in Harrenhal are farther away than Rook's Rest. I will tell you that. Like, that's for sure happening. So, I don't think it's something that they can just, like, hop on a dragon and be there in a moment's notice. It would take a little bit to get out there.
Yeah. King's Landing. Oh, yes, we got to talk about Aemon. Or Aegon.
Aegon, yes.
Aegon and Aemon. So Aegon wakes up, utters some words, and Aemon immediately is like, okay, well, I'm going to go see my brother then. And dismisses everyone. It's like, what do you remember?
Right, shut your mouth.
Yeah, what do you remember? You better not remember anything. Otherwise, you're going to get this pillow over your face. And as we learn by the end of the episode, when Aegon's last words being to Strong, help me.
Yeah, he remembers.
he remembers and was smart enough, which is surprising, smart enough not to say anything. So he is in a bad way.
I will say though, I did like the scene with him and Lara Strong because it reminded me a lot of Tyrion, actually, in the main Game of Thrones continuity here, where Tyrion gave that speech, I think, to Bran, where he was like waking up and he was a cripple now, and Tyrion was telling him, you know, I've been viewed as a cripple or viewed as less than my entire life, being someone who is shorter in stature, so I had to flex the most deadly muscle I have, and that's my brain. And Lara Strong is telling Aegon the exact same thing. He's like, your days of gallivanting around and having girls fawn over you are over. You have to become the scholar, the person that learns and is able to become the ruler that you need to be in order to still justify yourself being king now.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting because it definitely comes across, too, in their conversation that Larys knows that...
the details of their fight.
Yeah, and that Aemon tried to kill him.
Yes, right?
Yeah, so it's going to be intriguing to see how Larys helps Aegon. My assumption would be at some point, Aegon's probably going to disappear from King's Landing. Just because Aemon like once, you know, at some point Aegon would let something slip, right? And Aemon will not want everything to come out. But it'll be interesting to see with that. Anything else you want to add to King's Landing?
Just really that Alicent seems lost now that she's basically been shown the door. And the one smart move that Aemon did do is he summoned Otto Hightower back to be his hand while Aegon is recovering. But guess who's nowhere to be found? Otto Hightower is missing. At least as far as no one knows exactly where he is. But I'm sure we'll see his triumphant return sooner than later.
It will be intriguing. Yeah. Oh, man. I've been saving him for last here, Daemon, because there wasn't a lot in this episode. There's a lot more in the next episode. And so I'm kind of getting the two a little bit blurred together in my brain. But
yeah,
Daemon is finally kind of at a loss, right? He is losing his mind. He doesn't know what to do, and he is almost going to kill the member of House Strong that's still at Harren Hall. And
so yeah, Daemon's still tripping balls at Harren Hall.
Yeah,
and like I said last episode, that I've had enough of this with Daemon. Like again, like this episode kind of pushed it even farther because two things to me happened that are of significance with Daemon in this episode. The first of which is he openly admits, forget Rhaenyra, I'm going to be king. She can be my queen if she wants to be, but she has to take her place at my side. And what were your reactions to that, Mike?
I don't think that's going to stick. Because I think that's kind of what the dreams have sort of been pushing him towards, is like kind of knowing your place. Like, you've caused all these issues and you need to know when to like step down.
Yeah.
And I think too, Rivers kind of brought that up when he openly asked for help, even though it was like kind of begrudging. He asked her for help and she was like, you just need to wait a couple of days. And like, she kind of says the same thing. Like, you need to realize that you're not the player. You are a chess, like you're a piece on this board.
You're a piece in the game. You're not the player of the game.
Yes. Yeah. Like the players of the game, presumably, are Rhaenyra and, well, it was Aegon. I guess Aemon now? I don't know.
The Greens and the Blacks.
Yeah. Like, and honestly, it doesn't even feel like neither of those people really are the players either. I mean, I guess Rhaenyra more so, but for the Greens,
I mean, Aegon had his time as the player.
He chose to turn himself into a piece.
And then Alicent and Otto Hightower both had their times as the players.
Oh, yeah.
But they had been removed by Aemon, who is right now the current player of the Greens. But I will say, too, that when Alicent, I think it's Alicent Rivers, I forget, whatever her name is, Rivers, she tells Daemon, just be patient, see what happens. And then he hears, like a day or two later, that the old Tully died in his sleep. He almost has like a, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I had to ask for help from this person to be able to get to where I finally am now. Like, what has become of me?
Well, yeah, he was crying and everything, which we haven't really seen from him.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too with these visions that he's been getting. Like, this point on, and some of this is probably going into the next episode where he's crying over his brother and then his
that's next episode.
His brother's wife. Like, I think we're seeing him soften in a lot of ways, and I think that's important because it's going to lead into whatever decision he makes next, which, in my opinion, is him realizing his place and supporting Rhaenyra rather than trying to, circumvent her.
To usurp her?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
well, because all of this is made up about his disloyalty. So I would hope that it does end back there.
Well, as we've talked about too, because it's like histories, like these little details could have been there and then just lost in the telling, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, that's kind of this episode in a nutshell. It was good.
I will say that the highlight of this episode for me was the revolt in King's Landing, with the Smallfolk kind of saying enough is enough, give us food, we're starving to death, and then being supported by Rhaenyra. It shows like a shifting of the tides within King's Landing itself, away from the support of the Greens, because they were loving good Queen Alicent and Queen Helena when they brought the body of the dead boy, Jaehaerys, through the streets there. And all that goodwill has been burnt. And now they're supporting Rhaenyra and calling Alicent the Queen of Fishes and throwing fish at her.
Yes, and I wanted to bring this up too. Aemon suggests getting the help of the opposition to the Sea Snake.
Right.
Which everyone's like, yeah, no, we shouldn't do that. And he's like,
we should not trust them. There's a reason we went to war with them multiple times.
Yeah. He's like, it's fine. And
he's like, we don't need them to be loyal to us. We just need them to cause problems for him.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. They're really interesting. So we'll see what kind of the fallout from that is too. But yeah, I'm intrigued. And they also brought this up, is that the people shouldn't be upset with them. They should be upset with Rhaenyra, because technically the reason they don't have food is because of the blockade that she ordered. Which is true. But
very true.
It's kind of hard to see that when, like we've talked, perspective shift, right? Those people are in this, like, we don't have a lot situation. They're already, like, upset, like, and then they're seeing right in front of them, oh, wait, there is food. It's going to the dragons. Oh, it's going to them. They're having feasts up at the castle while we're starving. What the heck? This would never have happened with King Jaehaerys. And, they're not knowing all of the blockade and everything else, so...
Well, they're being told, I think they know there's a blockade, but still, like you said, between knowing there's a blockade and then seeing the food go to places other than them, like firsthand, that's where it's like, okay, so this blockade's not affecting you, but it's impacting us? What? What's up with that?
Yeah, so...
All right, but I think that's going to do it for this episode here. I'm very excited to talk about episode 7 with you for next time. But until then, this is going to be Two Nerds signing off. Bye.
Bye.